back with another lesson. This time we're going to be talking about dividing um, rational numbers. And these are, again, similar to multiplication. Division is just the inverse of multiplication. We're going to talk more about that. Um, so let's just get right into it. And let's talk about our definition for this set of notes, which is reciprocal. And a reciprocal is the inverse of a fraction. That is simply it. The inverse of a fraction. And we're going to talk about that in the second half. This is very important when we're talking about dividing fractions. The reciprocal is a inverse of a fraction. And I'd given you your triangle over here, just to keep that handy, because again, multiplication, division, this triangle still applies. So, first thing we're going to do here is we are going to divide some decimals. Now, in order to divide decimals, we have to manipulate our numbers a little bit. So I'm going to write this as a fraction first, because we know that fractions are just division problems. Now, I want to get rid of these decimals completely. So in order to do that, I have to multiply my fraction by a number, top and bottom, in order to get rid of these. Now, on the bottom here, I have more decimal places than I do the top. So I'm going to focus on this number first. And I want to multiply this by 100 because I want to get rid of both of those decimal places. Now anytime I'm doing with a fraction, I multiply on the bottom, I have to do the same thing on the top. That keeps the number the same. So when we're multiplying by anything multiples of 10, 100, 1,000, you just move the decimal place by the number of zeros. So this 1.6, the decimal moves over 2 places, we end up with 160. Same thing down here, move over 2 places, we end up with 4. Then we just divide. Well, 4 goes into 1 0 times. 0 times 4 is 0. Bring down our 6. 4 goes into 16. 4 times 4 times 4 is 16. 0, 0. 4 goes into 0, 0 times. Our answer here is 40. Okay? So, similar thing here. I have a decimal, but I want to get rid of this first. So I'm going to write this as a fraction. I have my negative 5. I'm going to put my 0.25 on the bottom, and I want to multiply it by a fraction so that I can get rid of this decimal. So similar, I have 2 places here. I want to get rid of them, multiply them by 100. So I end up with negative 500 over 25. And I'm just going to do my division problem here. Let me draw that better. Okay, well, 25 goes into 5 0 times. 0 times 25 is 0. We subtract that down, just ignore the negative sign, um, which would be 0 or 5, I'm sorry. Okay, bring down our 0. 25 goes into 50 2 times. 2 times 25 is 50. 0. Bring down our 0. 25 goes into 0 0 times. Our answer here is going to be 20. But don't forget, we're dividing a negative by a positive. So our answer is going to be negative, right? Okay. Alright, and it's just a repeat for these. We're going to write this as a fraction, 24, and we're dividing by negative 3.2. But this time, we only have one decimal place, so I'm going to multiply top and bottom by 10 instead. So we end up with 240 over negative 32, and we just do our division problem. 32 divided by 240. Well, 32 goes into 2 0 times. Subtract, bring down our 4. Well, 32 goes into 24 0 times. Multiply across. bring it down. 240. So 32 goes into 240. You might have to do a little bit of side math over here. I'm going to guess 7, possibly 8. I'm going to do 8. 8 times 2 would be 16. That would be 24 plus 1. Okay, I went too far, so it's definitely going to be 7. Okay, now our 7, let's do this over here, 32 times 7, we do need to know this. 7 times 2 is 14. 3 times 7 is 21, so it'd be 224. 224. Subtract these, I end up with 16. Okay, now, and let me undo that real quick, because this is important. So we have a remainder here. But on a problem like this, when we're dealing with decimals, we don't want a remainder. So in order to continue this problem, we have to create a decimal. Okay, so we're going to create a decimal, and then we're going to add a 0 on here. Okay, and then after that, we can bring it down and go into 160. Well, 32 goes into 160. I happen to know this. It's 5. 5 times 32. Let's just double check. 5 times 2 is 10. That'd be 15. Plus the 1 is 160. So we're not done yet. We have to carry. All you do is you take this decimal and you move it up exactly in the same place. Our answer here, remember, we're doing a positive divided by a negative. So our answer is going to be negative 7.5. All right. Now we get into dividing fractions, and this is where the reciprocal comes in. When dividing fractions, we must multiply by the reciprocal. So we're taking this division problem, and we're creating a multiplication problem by using the reciprocal of a number. Okay, so we have 1/2, and we're dividing it by 3/4. So in order to do this, again, we are multiplying by the reciprocal. So our first number stays the same. We turn it into a multiplication sign, and then we're going to multiply by the reciprocal. And all you do is you flip this one upside down. So now it becomes 4/3. And then it's just a regular multiplication problem. 1 times 4 is 4. 2 times 3 is 6. But we can reduce this further, right? We end up with 2/3. It's that easy. All right, same thing here. Well, we have a fraction. 4 is just a fraction, or 4 is just over 1, right? So that is our fraction. So we can rewrite this as 4 over 1, and we're going to multiply by the reciprocal. So we're just going to flip that one over and do 3 over -2. Okay? Well, 4 times 3 is 12. 1 times -2 is 2. This reduces to -6, and we have our answer. All right, and we continue on. Similar steps as the rest of them. We just carry over our -2/5, and we want to turn this into a multiplication problem, so we're going to multiply by the reciprocal, and we just flip that second one over, the 7 to the -5, the -5 to the 7, and then we just multiply across. So we end up with -14 over -25, because our 5 times -5. Well, because of our triangle, we know that a negative divided by a negative is a positive. We end up with 14/25. Okay? All right. And we continue on. We carry over our -1/7, and we want to turn it into a multiplication problem. So we keep our 1/7, we multiply by the reciprocal. So we do 14 over 3. Now, again, it doesn't matter where this negative sign is. You could put it up here, you could put it down here, you could put it up there, okay? So whatever is easier for your problem. So in this case, I can either leave it on the side or I'll put it on the bottom. That way we'll have one on top and bottom. So 1 times 14 is 14. 7 times 3 is 21. Our negative signs carry across because it's negative times positive. Well, negative over negative, those cancel out, and we end up with 14 over 21. Well, I know these are both divisible by 7, so I can reduce this to 2/3. All right. And for number 4, it is just a fraction divided by a fraction. It's a fraction, 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 fraction. And it's the same exact problem. I mean, we could rewrite this as -1/5, because again, this negative sign here, we could write it on the outside of the fraction. We can give it to the top, we can give it to the bottom. It doesn't actually matter when we're talking about this negative sign. So I'm just going to give it to this 1/5. And this is just if I could rewrite this instead of as a fraction, I can write this as dividing by 7/5. These two are the same thing. Well, I want to carry over my -1/5, and I'm going to turn it into a multiplication problem. So I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal. -1 times 5 is -5. 5 times 7 is 35. Well, I can reduce that. They're both divisible by 5, so I end up with -1/7. All right, let's give some word problems a try. Now we're going to be dealing with some averages, and we'll go over that in a second. In the last Northeast football game, Jayla carried the ball 9 times for a total loss of 15 3/4 yards. We want to find the average change in field position on each run. Okay, so each run we have 5 3/4 yards 9 times. So we want to do 15 3/4, and we're dividing that by 9. All right. Well, we have a fraction problem here. So we want to get rid of this whole number. Well, 4 times 15 would be 40 plus 20, so we end up with 63 over 4, because we multiply the 4 by the 15, add it to the 3. And we know that 9, as a whole number, we can just write it over 1. So if we want to turn this into a multiplication problem, and our 9 over 1, the reciprocal of that, ends up becoming 1/9. And then we can just multiply across. We end up with 63, and then 4 times 9 is 36. Well, these are both divisible by 9. Well, 63 would be 7, 36 would be 4, and we end up with 7/4. But that, when we're talking about a problem like this, you wouldn't want to say Jayla lost 7/4 of a yard each run. It doesn't make much sense. So we want to turn this back into, we want to put the whole number back over here, a proper fraction. So 4 goes into 7 one time, and then our remainder, we just end up with 3/4. Okay? So we can write here that Jayla lost 1 3/4 yards each run. All right? So Ty, number 2 here, Ty decided to record the temperature each day at 6 a.m. for 4 consecutive days. He recorded -12.1 degrees Celsius, -7.8 degrees Celsius, -14.3 degrees Celsius, and -7.2 degrees Celsius. What was the average temperature for the 4 days? Well, same thing with an average. We just want to take the total number. So we're going to add these up, and then we want to divide by how many there are. So our problem ends up being -12.1 plus -7.8 plus -14.3 plus a -7.2. Okay? And then we want to divide our total here by 4, because that's how many we have. We're taking an average. So 1, 2, 3, 4 data points. We want to divide this whole thing by 4. Well, when I end up adding all these together, and we're adding a negative each time, right? So they're getting smaller. Well, 12.1 plus a -7.8 plus a -14.3 plus a -7.2 This ends up being negative 41.4. Okay, and then we carry over our 4 here, and we want to do this problem. Well, we don't have 2 decimal places, so we don't need to get rid of this decimal. We can actually just do this as a regular division problem. We can do our 41.4. Well, 4 goes into 41.4, or 44 goes into 4 one time. 1 times 4 is 4. We subtract them, we end up with 0. We get a 1. 4 goes into 1 0 times. Okay. 0 times 4 is 0. We subtract these, we end up with 14. 4 goes into 14 3 times. Okay. And we want to do 3 times 4 would be 12. We're going to subtract these. We end up with 2. Well, we need to borrow here, right? So we're going to keep going. We're going to add a 0 to the end. Well, 4 goes into 25 times, and we just carry up our decimal. So we end up, and again, remember we got to go back here. We're a negative divided by a positive. So our answer is going to be negative 10.35 degrees Celsius. And we can write this in words. The average temperature for the 4 nights. Oh, jeez. Was negative 10.35 degrees Celsius. All right. And once again, same as the last notes, if you're having issues with any of these, please ask your teacher, whichever the sub is there. They should be able to help you with those. If they aren't, there's also, or if you don't want to ask, there are videos from Khan Academy as well as Virtual Nerd in the Google Classroom, or you can always email me with any questions that you have. All right, so please ask. Thank you.